Hi everyone, welcome to this evening session. This is the third Hacktoberfest session, and tonight we're going to talk about front-end and web components. And for that, I have a former colleague with me. He's now in another team. Hey Pascal,
Hey.
How you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
So Pascal is working at ING as a front-end developer, right? And
Correct.
you've been doing web components for how many years now?
I think coming up on 3 years now.
Okay, time passes. So
Yeah.
we do a lot of web components at ING, and he started knowing nothing. In 3 years now, he's you'll see, he's one of the main guys behind OpenWSA. Tonight we get a pre-recorded talk, so it's not going to be live. Pascal preferred to do that, and I think that's okay because that allows me to experiment as well. So we're going to fire the stream. Before, I have one question, Pascal. How far are you with the Hacktoberfest pull requests? How many do you have?
I've already got my 4 pull requests done, and I think I'm 6 over. So I think I have 10 in total.
Oh, can you see when you have more than 4? I have to check that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. No further ado, we're jumping into the talk. If you have questions, don't forget that ask them during the talk because there is a 20-second delay between the moment you ask the questions and the moment we can see them. So ask the questions as they go, and at the end, Pascal will be there to answer your questions. We're going to have 2 different things in this talk tonight. The first one is going to be an introduction how Pascal started doing open source and what he's doing now. And the second thing is going to be introduction to web components, open web components, one of the projects he's working on, and modern web. So no further ado, I'm going to be starting the stream.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Pascal Schilp. I'm a front-end engineer at ING Bank. And in my free time, I like to work on open source projects such as open web components and modern web. At ING, I work on the product shop, and I recently got dedicated time by ING to work on open source projects, which is really awesome. One of the projects that I work on is open web components. And at Open Web Components, we provide guides, tools, and libraries for developing web components. At ING, we also make extensive use of web components. Yeah, so basically we try to be a one-stop shop for anything that you need to start developing web components. So, for example, if you need a testing setup, we got you covered. A linting setup, we have all these things, so you can just start writing code without having to worry about all these things. These are some of the core principles that we stand by. So we like to keep things simple and transparent. We like to promote buildless development. So we don't like to have to mess around with extremely complicated webpack configurations and stuff like that. Instead, we like to stay close to browser standards. And we also like to be modular and easy to extend. So what I mean by that is, for example, we have a linting configuration. Linting is a very opinionated subject, I guess. So if you don't agree with one of our linting rules, then it should be easy enough to extend and make it your own. One thing I should mention is that even though most of us working on OpenWC also work at ING, OpenWC is not strictly related to ING. It really is an open source project. Yeah. So here's the core team. So Thomas, Manuel, Lars, Joren, and me all work at ING. Then there's Westbrook, working for Adobe, and then Benny working for Neue Energy, if I got that correctly. I hope I did. But most importantly, of course, the contributors. We have a really active community. We have a Slack community, and what we see is that we get lots of like small contributions from lots of different people, which we think is really nice. Yeah, we think that's a really great thing, that there's lots of people making small contributions to our project here and there. Who's using OpenWC? Some of the companies that use our tooling include Vaadin, Intel, Microsoft, Google, Adobe, and obviously ING as well. Yeah, so among our recommendations, we have code demos. So what we try to do is we try to have everything ready for people to start developing web components. So we provide these code demos. So if you're new to web components and you're wondering, like, how do I do, how do I manage properties, or how do I fire an event or something like that, you can just take a quick look at these code demos and have like a working example. If you want to go a little bit more in depth, we also have code labs. They're more of like a walkthrough kind of tutorial style code lab. They go a little bit more in depth, and they give you a really good understanding of like how things work and what is going on. So if you're interested, you can take a look there. And we also provide a project scaffolding. So if you're interested in starting a project using web components, you can use our project scaffolding, and you get everything out of the box, right? You don't have to set up your own testing environment. It just comes with it. We also, very importantly, have automated accessibility testing out of the box. We have a demoing setup using Storybook for you, a rollup configuration as well, and it's also a PWA right out of the box. So if you're looking to start a new project, please try our project scaffolder, and hopefully you can just get up to speed very quickly. To summarize, again, we try to be a one-stop shop for developing web components. So if there's anything you need, like testing, building, developing, linting, etc., please try it out. Let us know what you think. If there's anything missing, also let us know, and maybe we can improve on some stuff. Another project that I work on kind of branched off from OpenWC, and so we found that a lot of the stuff, or well, some of the stuff that we were working on really isn't that tightly coupled to web components necessarily. So, for example, our development server, ESDev server, really isn't strictly related to web components, but can also be useful to the wider front-end community. So if you have a Preact project, for example, like, it also works really well with that. So we decided to kind of branch off from Open Web Components and start a new initiative called Modern Web, which is where we'll be moving some of our more generic or general tooling. So some of these projects is our web dev server, which is basically the successor to ESDev server. And another project that Lars has been vigorously working on lately is the Web Test Runner. Web Test Runner specifically is a very exciting project. Web Test Runner allows you to run your tests in real browsers using Puppeteer or Playwright or Selenium, whichever you prefer. The reason being, so no Node environments, no JS DOM or something. The reason being that, yeah, your users are using real browsers, so we should be testing our code in real browsers as well. It supports native ES modules. It runs tests in parallel and also in isolation, which is really nice. And it also has a really nice interactive watch, but also debug mode. And having used it myself, I can say it's a really nice experience. So today I'll be talking about my experience of getting into open source, and I'll be sharing some of the tips and tricks that I learned along the way, and that hopefully can help you getting your feet wet in open source as well. So yeah, one of the things I wanted to share with you was my first pull request. And my first pull request actually was on the OpenWC repository. So Thomas, the guy who started OpenWC, he was really active on like the Polymer Slack as well. And one day he just came up with this project, OpenWC. I thought the name was a little bit weird, but like, I knew Thomas worked at ING. I didn't know him personally, or I didn't really know him professionally. But he's like this super driven developer. Like he's super smart and he's very enthusiastic about open source. And he came up with this project. And like Thomas is an incredible developer, but he's not as good a writer. So there were quite some like typos and like mistakes in the documentation. So I figured like, okay, well, this guy is super enthusiastic and he also works at ING. So like maybe I can help him out by fixing these typos and stuff in the documentation. And so my first pull request ever, I think, was just documentation changes. And I remember like when this got merged, it felt really nice to like, even though this was like a relatively small contribution, it was really nice to have a feeling of like having helped the project, even a little bit. Another contribution that I wanted to share with you, and I think this is an important one, is one that I did on ES Module Shims, which is a project by Guy Bedford. For those of you who are not familiar with Guy Bedford, he's like one of the greats from the Node ecosystem. He's like an incredibly smart developer. He does a lot for ES modules. And this project, ES Module Shims, basically is just that, right? It's a shim for ES modules. It's basically a polyfill for ES modules. So it allows you to use ES modules even in browsers that don't support it. And at the time, I was working on a project that where I was using ES Module Shims. And I wanted to use a feature of import maps that were specified at the time, but were not supported by ES Module Shims yet. I really wanted to make use of this. So I figured, like, I have a free afternoon to hack on this. Like, maybe I just try to implement it myself. Because if I just create an issue and wait for Guy to maybe at some point eventually get around to it, like, it'll probably take a while, if at all. And I figured it could be a good challenge as well. But that then also is kind of where maybe the like some anxiety comes in, right? Like Guy Bedford is like this incredible developer, and like this is like a polyfill project. So you start thinking like, maybe I'm not good enough, or like maybe this is not for me, like this is way above my skill level right now. And yeah, some insecurities can start to pop up. But I figured I challenged myself, and I would try to make a pull request. And the response that I got from Guy really caught me by surprise. Guy was super appreciative of the fact that I had made a pull request. He was super helpful. He obviously found some stuff in my code that needed improvement, and he was super respectful about it. And he let me know how to improve it and why to improve it. And eventually it got merged. And I think overall it was, like, for both maintainer and contributor, it was a really nice experience to have done this contribution. Yeah, so I think yeah, so that kind of brings me to the first tip that I'd like to share with you, is which is reach out and ask for help. Like, it's totally fine to ask for help so long as you ask nicely. Yeah, apparently this needs to be said, but, like, please do be respectful. No means no, and you're not guaranteed or even owed a reply. Like, many open source maintainers work on their projects in their free time. They often don't get paid for it. So an open source maintainer doesn't owe you anything. But I think you'll find if you just ask nicely and respectfully, then maintainers more often than not are more than happy to just help you out. Yeah, so some of these questions could be like, how do I, like, I would like to contribute to this project. How do I get things running locally? Or, like, how do I run a test? How do I run the test suite? Which also brings me to the point that, like, reading a project's tests are a really good way to learn about the inner workings of a project. Because, yeah, if you read the tests, you'll probably see a test. If I call this function with these arguments, this is what I expect to be the output. So it can really help you, like, get a good grasp of, like, yeah, how a project's inner workings work, I guess. Sometimes projects will have a contributing MD file, and the goal of a contributing MD file is to tell you these things, like how to get the tests running, how to get started. But not all projects do this. But yeah, maybe before you start asking questions, try to see if there's a contributing MD. If the contributing Markdown file doesn't answer your question, like, reach out, just ask nicely. Yeah, and this also brings me to the second tip, which is kind of a little bit cliche, and I think maybe smarter isn't necessarily the correct word here. I think it should be different, but it is surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. Even being part of, like, a community, or, like, listening to other people working on projects, watching a project progress, can really help you give new insights as well, and it can really teach you a lot as well. Small shout out to the OpenWC core team. All of these people are really great developers, and I personally really have learned a lot from all of them just by talking with them, trying to help contribute to projects, but also discussing about projects with them. And for me personally, as a developer, it really has helped me grow a lot. Yeah, so the third tip is kind of related to this, but it is join a community. Most projects will have like a Slack group, or like a Discord, where people will just hang out. There's often lots of shenanigans around, but these communities can also be super helpful. Like, for example, the other day, some guy came into our Slack channel asking for a routing recommendation, and it started this whole thread of people recommending routers and giving advice and giving different insights, and it was like a really wholesome experience. So yeah, joining and being part of a community can definitely be helpful as well. Yeah, so then you may ask, okay, but then like, how do I really get started in open source? Obviously, Hacktoberfest is a really good stepping stone. Like me personally, have really enjoyed Hacktoberfest, both as a maintainer, but also as a contributor. We've been getting lots of nice contributions. I've been doing some contributions myself as well. And overall, I think it's a really nice experience. So how to get started, like especially during Hacktoberfest, lots of projects on GitHub will label issues with a Hacktoberfest label. Sometimes issues will also have a good first issue label as well. So just dive into a project's issues tracker and try to see if there's any labels or any issues that you can pick up. And like even if a project doesn't have like a Hacktoberfest label or a good first issue, just try to read the issue. Just pick one at random or one that seems interesting to you personally. Try to read it, try to understand it, and again, ask questions. So, for example, there's this guy. I think his name is Thiago. He's been around in the community for a little bit, and this Hacktoberfest, he's been really killing it. He's been making lots of super valuable contributions to OpenWC, and he just started diving into issues, and like he's proposing solutions, he's asking questions. Yeah, it's led to a couple of really nice contributions so far. So my advice here is just read about a project's issues, and if it's not clear or if you're not sure how to get started, just contact the maintainers in those issues. It's totally fine. Yeah, so I used to always end any talk on OpenWC with this slide. Any contribution is a valuable contribution. I don't know how aware everybody is, but this Hacktoberfest was a little bit controversial because lots of people were making spam pull requests. So I guess I had to change this slide to most contributions are a meaningful contribution. So typo fixes, definitely valuable contributions, but please don't do stuff like this. Yeah, people just started making pull requests and adding the word like amazing to a sentence. So yeah, like this is probably less meaningful. So really try to question yourself, like, hey, is this contribution that I did, is this a meaningful contribution or not? And please don't contribute to Spamtoberfest. Yeah, so then that also brings me to contributions don't have to be code even. Valuable contributions can also be to just update an outdated dependency, doing typo fixes, or improving documentation by, like, for example, maybe some piece of documentation is very vague or very unclear, or you didn't understand it. So it could be helpful to maybe like add a code snippet or an example or a demo or something like that. Like those are definitely valuable contributions. Another tip is start small. You sometimes see these crazy active contribution graphs. Yeah, I don't think this should be the goal for anyone. Like, I think if this is what your GitHub contribution chart looks like, I think you either work on open source full time or you're headed towards a burnout. Start small, aim for small, meaningful contributions, learn about how a project works, and have a good time, basically. The next tip is write blogs about what you've learned, share the knowledge. So for example, if you've made a contribution to a project, like maybe you solved a nasty bug, or maybe you really did a deep dive on the inner workings of some project, and you've learned a lot about that, write a blog about it, share the knowledge. Writing blogs can be a really good way to develop yourself as a developer as well. But also, in a way, blogging about a project is also a way of contributing, because if you if somebody reads that, that may also trigger them to go and check out this project. One small additional tip on top of this: please get your blogs peer reviewed. There's an abundance of blogs out there, and not all of them are good or even share correct information, unfortunately. So yeah, I would really advise to always get your blogs peer reviewed. Just ask a colleague or a friend, or ask in a project's community. I've even asked maintainers in the past, and I'm not sure if I should really be recommending that, because people probably have enough to do. But again, I think you'll find more often than not, if you ask people nicely, they will be more than happy to help out. To summarize, I think I've said this quite a lot during this presentation, but reach out, ask for help, be respectful, and aim for meaningful contributions, no matter how small, and try to have fun, try to have a good time contributing. If you're interested in more information about open web components or modern web, you can find our documentation sites there, as well as the GitHub links. We always like to participate in Hacktoberfest, so you'll also find Hacktoberfest issues in our repository, in case anybody got inspired to contribute. You can find me on Twitter, Pascal_. I'm quite active on Twitter. And you can also find our OpenWC and Modern Web community in the Polymer Slack. You can find the invite link down below. There's usually a bunch of us hanging out there. So if you have any questions or insights or need help or whatever, feel free to join and talk to us. And that's all. Thanks for joining, and have a great evening. I can't hear you. Hello.
And that's better if I unmute myself.
Yes.
I said first lessons learned is to not believe StreamYard when they say it's okay when you stream a Chrome tab. We'll have to find something better for next time. The quality wasn't great. All right. So now that you spent half an hour watching yourself, Pascal, I realized something. Can you help us first, because we didn't define what web components are, and it's obvious to you and maybe to me because I work a lot with it. But can you explain a bit what web components are, and what use are they?
Sure. Yeah. So in the front end world, there are many different ways to approach front end, but most of the modern libraries these days settled on a component model of some kind. So if you look at React or Vue or Angular, they all have some kind of component model. They all define a component model. And so web components are the browser's native component model. Web components are basically they're a set of browser standards that help you create reusable components that are usable in any kind of framework, but also without any kind of framework.
I'm sharing your Twitter. Someone was asking for your Twitter.
Yeah, I was just watching the chat right there.
All right. Did people see the slides? I don't see them in StreamYard, but I think you shared the slides already.
Yeah, I tried to link them in the chat. I'm not sure if maybe like YouTube chat filters out links or something.
It's probably okay. We'll send an email afterwards anyways with the slides.
Okay.
To everyone. So we have a question from Jeroen. There was a discussion during the talk about the platforms and how beginner friendly they are. So the different ways to ask for information and to ask for comments and reviews and things like that. And he's asking, what's your experience in terms of, I'm a beginner and I want to start and I'm going to ask for help on Reddit or Slack?
Yeah, I think in my experience, a lot of these communities are very beginner friendly, but I do know for sure that there also are communities also in like different languages or projects that maybe are a little less inviting. But in my experience, like many of these communities are super friendly, like especially if you go to like the little bit more like the channels like Slack or a Discord are super how do you say, like low key, people are just hanging out. I mean, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword as well, because sometimes you'll see people come into like a Slack, they join, they ask a question without giving you any context, and they're just expecting an answer. So that also makes it really hard to like help you. But I think generally, if you come in somewhere and you're nice and you're respectful and like, if you're looking for help, please provide enough context. Maybe some code snippets can also be helpful, or like even like a reproduction on something like StackBlitz or like a GitHub gist or something like that. Then I think you'll find that people are generally very willing to help you.
Yeah, if you've done your homework, my experience is it's usually good, right? I mean, if people see that you've been banging your head and you're trying to make the job easy for them to understand what your problem is, and you don't mention everybody in the channel by typing at all,
Yeah, please don't do that.
Okay. There is another question from Tim. Maybe naive question, are the OpenWC and modern web platforms JavaScript specific?
Yes, we make JavaScript tooling. Yeah, I can be short about that. Yeah.
Okay, I don't think we have many other questions so far. What are you up to with OpenWC and modern web? I've seen more and more communication about modern web lately, more than OpenWC, I think. Can you explain a bit more where it's headed? What's coming up?
Yes. So as I mentioned, we quite recently started out with modern web. So we're still in the process of like making sure all the documentation is where it needs to be. We're moving projects from OpenWC to modern web as well. The biggest projects for modern web right now definitely are the test runner and the dev server. But we also have stuff in there like we just added rollup plugin, rollup plugin copy, but we also have rollup plugin workbox and some other stuff like that. On the OpenWC side, we're also working a lot on the documentation side. Thomas is working on a new, kind of documentation site generator that works, that builds on top of 11t together with a multi-page application rollup build as well. We're obviously also using that for our documentation sites. So we're just fine-tuning that and making sure everything is where it needs to be and everything makes sense.
And when you say where it needs to be, I mean, if I paraphrase and you correct me, you mean everything web component directly related goes to OpenWC, and everything that is not goes to modern web.
Exactly. Yeah. So we, I already also mentioned that in my talk, but there's quite a lot of stuff in OpenWC right now that's not strictly related to web components. So we're moving all that stuff to modern web while keeping all the strictly web component stuff in OpenWC.
All right. Okay. We have another question. We had to have one, right? What is your take on the failed promise of web components lately?
I'm
not sure you want to answer. You don't have to.
No, I'm good. I also tweeted about it. Follow me on Twitter. I think a lot of the pain points that she discussed are legitimate and valid. I also don't think a lot of the points she discussed are web component specific.
I haven't read the article, so maybe you can. Yeah, exactly. I was going to ask, for example.
So some of the examples that she gives is having a top level application component that you just render your entire application in, and then if JavaScript doesn't work, you have an empty page. This definitely was not popularized by web components. A lot of web components application use this pattern, but I don't think it's entirely fair to pinpoint stuff like that on web components. I think web components get enough slack as it is. I felt here and there the article was a little bit ungenuine, because in the end she makes a really nice remark about let's make it better, and let's get some people together and let's do something interesting here. But then also titles the article "The Failed Promise of Web Components." I feel if you really wanted to help make it better, then you probably would have chosen a different title.
Okay.
But it's fair. That's my personal opinion on it.
All right. Yeah, web components have been taking a lot of heat for various reasons over the years. For those of you that don't know, it's a bit like the running jokes about PHP. It's like the language that always takes most of the crap. It's PHP, and web components is a bit like that, I think. Yeah. But I do feel and it might be very naive, but I only care about my user. I don't care so much about React or Vue myself or anything else. I just want to serve my user. So anything that starts with technology X is better than technology Y, I'm always like, well, okay, we're one level too far already somehow. So okay. Do we have any more questions? Because otherwise we're going to close, I think. What's the biggest feature you've been working on lately? To think if they have last questions.
Sorry, what's that?
I was as people maybe think if they have more questions, I have a last question for you. It's what feature have you been working on lately?
So I have been working on something called Custom Elements JSON. And Custom Elements JSON is something of a community standard. And what it is it basically is a JSON file that describes the custom elements that you have in your project. And the reason for custom elements JSON to exist is because it's going to unlock a lot of capabilities for tooling. So you can think about things like IDE support, but also things like documentation viewers, stuff like that. They could all use this custom elements JSON, which lists all the custom elements in the project and all their like properties and attributes and slots and the events that they fire and all that stuff. There is a project called Web Component Analyzer that already creates a custom elements JSON for you, but it's not entirely up to date with the latest specification. So I started working on one since the maintainer of Web Component Analyzer doesn't really seem to respond, and that's totally fair enough. Like I already mentioned, like open source maintainers don't owe you anything. But at the same time, we would really like to move forward with this custom elements JSON format. I started making an implementation of my own.
Okay. All right. There is still no question, so I think we can close a little early.
Okay.
Is there any specific feature you would really love to have contributions for at the moment? I say feature, but is there anything specific, whether in OpenWC or if in Modern Web? If someone was coming and telling you, I'd love to contribute, where would you direct them right now? Any of the issues, or is there one in particular that you really love help for?
Yeah, so we do have a couple of Hacktoberfest issues. We've had quite some contributions already as well, so a couple of them are already gone. But on OpenWC, we're also working on an ESLint plugin for accessibility in lit HTML templates, which I think would be a really good place for people to start contributing, because a linting rule is really an isolated piece of code. It's very easily testable, this is relative, of course, but the implementations are not very hard. Like, it's not rocket science. There's an existing pull request and an issue for it, and there's also some documentation in there on how to get started. So if anybody is interested in that, we would definitely love some contributions there.
Okay. I think you already shared the slides. We'll send them anyways. You can find the Twitter handle from Pascal in the comments. I've already sent it. I expect it went through. Thanks for joining. I'll close by saying happy birthday to Thomas, right? It's today.
Yep. Happy birthday, Thomas. I'm not sure if he's watching.
Maybe not tonight, but tomorrow. I don't know. Thanks for joining. And see you at the office one day, maybe, hopefully.
Hopefully. Yeah, and thanks for having me and for organizing this event.
Thanks, everyone, for joining. See you next week. Next week, we're going to have 2 talks. Jeroen is in the comments. I know he's there. He's going to talk about how to get your first 100 stars on GitHub project. Maybe he left early, but he was there. I've seen him. And we're also going to have one of the main developers from Corona, Melder, to talk about the project and how you can contribute to the Corona application in the Netherlands. So if you're up for it, join us next week, same time, 5 p.m. All right. Bye, everyone. Cheers.